Welcome to BreakingWoke, how to identify, debunk, and dismantle dangerous ideas. I'm Douglas Kruger, author of the global new book, Political Correctness Does More Harm Than Good. World Economic Forum founder Klaus Schwab has been writing and speaking about his new hobby, which of course is remaking the world according to his preferences, in something that he and others term the Great Reset. By now you've heard the term. The Great Reset follows this line of reasoning. COVID lockdowns broke economies. We need to restart them in ways deemed to be more enlightened. More enlightened translates to less messy free trade and small businesses and interpersonal decision-making, more centralized government control, and also more powerful multinational corporations. The irony is that economies were ruined by government control, and the proposed solution to a problem created by government control is more government control. The Great Reset is supposed to be a reality by 2030, and a troubling number of world leaders are on board with this project. By historical standards, 2030 is just around the corner, which means detecting errors in this idea is an urgent project for humanity. We could spend a day on this, and I encourage you to watch videos that debunk this notion from other perspectives. For our purposes here, let's focus on just one aspect. Quote, "You will own nothing, and you will be happy." I would not be the first to point out that the somber, bespectacled Klaus, who meets with wealthy elites in Davos every year to plan the future of the world, has all the makings of a Bond villain in real life. Or that his telling us what will make us happy is somewhat sinister. But rather than aim pejoratives at him, let us merely debunk this one idea. Here are 11 things wrong with it, plus a test of your capacity to resist groupthink. Problem number one. There are nearly 8 billion of us. Klaus is telling us what our future will be. Did Klaus ask us if that is what we want? Shouldn't we decide what each of us want our future to be? This proposed social engineering on a planetary scale is not something we have volunteered for. Moreover, it is unproven and therefore inherently dangerous. What happens if it doesn't work? What if unforeseen problems arise? How will we undo it? But more than that, what if our response is simply the very human, "No thank you, I don't want that for my life," times several billion people? Do we retain that freedom? Or does our entire species discover that it is simply obliged to conform? This diktat from Davos is in no way democratic. It has not consulted with anyone except itself. It does not even pretend to be the will of the people. It has to be enforced, and we'll get to that, and will have immense costs in the form of upheaval and loss, for everyone, that is, except the people proposing it. If we quite simply don't want to upend our entire existences and to live differently, do we get a choice to opt out? If not, what does that say about the state of freedom of humanity, and who its oppressors are? But I'm sure it's being done for our own good, so that makes it okay, right? Number two, the vision is utopian. It follows this schema. Once we, the elites, reorganize the world for you, all will be well. Our species has seen this play before. Every totalitarianism and ideology of the previous century, along with their spectacular death tolls via government genocide or starvation, or a combination of the two, arose on the basis of utopian thinking that followed the schema, once we reorganize the world, all will be well. And also, don't resist, we're doing this for your own good. And every time it was done, and this is interesting, technology was called upon as the thing that was different this time. The communist utopian visions that killed over 100 million people sprang from the new technologies of the Industrial Revolution, which were seen as miraculous at the time, a new means of feeding the masses that was bound to save us all, if only we would allow the elites to make it so. This formula has a 100% failure rate, and the costs of this discovery have been staggering. Mr. Schwab is proposing that we try it again, this time on a planetary scale. But don't worry, this time around we have new technology, the wonders of digital and AI, and that will make it work. And besides, it's for your own good. Number three, the impulse driving this utopian vision is identical to the Marxist impulse that drove the previous disastrous visions. When you look past the digital glitz and computerized modernity of Klaus's delivery from a high-tech stage, what is the underpinning philosophy? What's the thing at the heart of it? It is this: ownership, bad. Collectivism, good. We all work together and the government distributes according to need. Yes? Yes. The impulse is so obviously Marxist that it is almost embarrassing. Communal usage is the way of the future. Let us unite to work and we shall all enjoy equality. It is indistinguishable from the philosophy of Marx and the promises of Lenin. That particular joke is now over a century old and it isn't funny any longer. Number 4. The very concept of property ownership underpins human rights. Remove property ownership, you decimate human rights. Here's why. Historically, the mass of humanity labored under sovereigns, chiefs, lords, or kings, and individuals owned little or nothing. Their labor enriched the power of the day. Serfs merely received the minimum of life's amenities in return for their labor, and under such circumstances, those who owned everything did, in fact, abuse their power. If I like your wife, your daughter, your cattle, your home, the location of your property by the river, I can commandeer them. And what can you do? You are totally dependent upon me for everything in your world, and therefore for my grace and favor. This is what Klaus is suggesting we return to, merely modernized and with the additional of digital devices. One of the greatest steps forward for humanity was the liberation of the individual from the tyranny of those who owned him, who owned where he lived, and who owned everything around him. If what you need to live is owned by others, you are totally vulnerable to them at all times. Anger a leader, refuse to toe the line, fail the test of political correctness, and they can destroy you on a whim. Property puts power back in the hands of ordinary people, and a law that upholds property rights is a law that keeps those people free. It is also one of the great cornerstones of broad prosperity. Number 5. Every tyranny of the previous century, the most murderous century in history by outright numbers, began with the vilification and then the dissolution of property rights. The Jews had their homes taken away. The Russians had their farms collectivized. The Tutsis had their businesses and their possessions confiscated. The victims of the Khmer Rouge had their land expropriated. Tyranny, step 1, is the removal of property rights. The very impulse to paint property ownership in a negative light should concern anyone who understands this. UK Prime Minister Maggie Thatcher famously worked to expand human liberty by ensuring as much broad-based private property ownership as possible. Property and personal liberty are inextricably bound in history, in law, and in practice. Number 6. The very idea that nobody will own anything is a myth, a dangerous fiction, a con. Someone owns. Even if most of us rent to use from those very few who own, someone ultimately owns. So trace it backward. How few then will own under this new paradigm? This project removes small businesses from that equation, the small businesses that currently supply, and it strengthens the massive, all-powerful multinationals. And it gets them and government in bed together, working as one. Again, what could possibly go wrong? The smaller the number of owners, the more this becomes true. He who owns everyone. The solution to this dangerous imbalance is the opposite of Klaus's proposition. Namely, ownership should be as broad as possible, not focused in the hands of a powerful few. When the concentration of power goes into the hands of a very small group of extraordinarily powerful elites, here is what can go wrong, illustrated by modern China and its social point system. If you, the citizen, do not act in ways that the leaders deem politically correct, acceptable behavior for the day, you are ghosted. Your accounts are frozen, your ability to transact is revoked, your home, which you do not own, can be taken away. You must at all times kowtow to those who own everything, or your entire life can be effectively removed, eradicated at the push of a button. No more dissidence. That is how vulnerable a populace becomes when it does not own its own property. This is already a reality in China. Make no mistake though, this idea will not be sold as a property monopoly of the elite. That's not how it happens. Instead, we will be told ownership will belong to everyone. We all own everything. It's the same con used in Soviet Russia. We the people, we the workers own the means of production together, except that in reality, the powerful few utterly own you. That's how it actually works. Number 7. Anyone who understands how free markets, capitalism, entrepreneurship, and broad-based prosperity work will immediately see several flaws in such a non-capitalist system, which Klaus describes as a circular economy. Hint, it's a nice-sounding new term for Marxism. Here are merely the headlines, the most important failure. Centrally planned economies lag way behind free markets in GDP, standards of living, innovation, creativity, all things to do with the success of humanity. They do so for the simplest of reasons. They vacuum human incentive out of the equation. Economic attempts at getting human beings to work just because everyone must work, because we are an egalitarian society, and not because their work can improve their lot, always result in disaster. Human nature doesn't respond to this utopian abstraction, and we know because we've tried. And what comes next if it fails? If people will not work, if the system is not moving forward, well, force comes next, because it must. Otherwise, the entire thing collapses. And that, in a very quick nutshell, is why Marxism always leads to tyranny. And with property rights removed, the tyranny becomes just that much worse. Number 8. Try this one on for size. We already own. Globally and broadly, we have homes, we have cars, jewelry, businesses, treasured family heirlooms, books that we love, property that you've bought, your wedding ring, the presents you buy for your child at Christmas each year. What happens about that? If Klaus is to be taken seriously, then some people having more than others must ultimately be a problem to a system in which nobody owns, and they will be happy. Haha. Will that which is already owned be tolerated and left alone? Will it be left intact? History would suggest that step 1 in this process, which we have seen before many times, is to vilify ownership and to glorify the communal. That is what Great Reset philosophy already does, quite openly. Step 2, once the proponents of collectivist ideas attain sufficient power, is to confiscate that which is already owned. And if your instinctive reaction to that is, it would never happen here, why not? History would suggest that it goes that way in 100% of cases. Not only can it do that, it always does. Now try that thought on for size in your own life. Are you open to being made happy with no property by having your property removed? If your property is not removed, you don't fit the prescription, and that makes you an anomaly. Do you believe that those who engage in massive social engineering like to tolerate anomalies to their utopian vision or their grand idea? The prescription is, you will own nothing. Number 9. This is not the best of us. This is the worst of us. The best human instinct is to bravely build and grow, to make and to create, to promote freedom, creativity, innovation, and growth. It is a rising up and a going forward. The worst human instincts are fear and a need to be perpetually protected. This is the opposite of growth and creativity. It is the opposite of life. It is retreat into the infant's basic need for a parent to take care of everything before they become fully alive and fully able to do things for themselves. When we are free and creative, we take personal accountability for the expenditure of our own energies. This has proven itself to be a formula for great prosperity, and psychologically, it's an extremely healthy and necessary step into adulthood. A system by which the state becomes the parent, removes our need to become something, and simply gives us all the stuff instead. It infantilizes us. As Nassim Taleb so eloquently argues in Anti-Fragile, we need challenge. We need to bounce against difficulty, to grow and to become via challenge. And as we do, we become more resilient, more creative, more resourceful, more innovative, and we teach our children everything that we have learned. And it's easier today than ever before. We no longer live in medieval forests, living lives of perpetual want, foraging for berries just to stave off hunger and hoping to live to the age of 30. Instead, we live in a miraculous time of innovation, of creativity, in which a free young person can legitimately ask questions like whether they can get enough YouTube subscribers to live off their video production. And if not, whether they might need to take a part-time job or to study while they build that up. How miraculous. How much further could we go? The answer, under the Great Reset, effectively becomes, well, that's it. We're done. Now we have stuff and we live passively. Marxists called it the end of history. Number 10. Perhaps the most chilling aspect of this idea is that its proponents advocate using the tools aimed at combating the coronavirus crisis to bring about this new desired reality. They state that this is in the interests of the environment, and that the end goal, due by 2030, is that you will own nothing and, of course, be happy. The tools used against the coronavirus crisis, which they hope to enlist in this new cause and openly state that they want to enlist, include forced lockdowns, isolation, banning of public gatherings, media curatorship, read censorship, business shutdowns, and fines for those who do not comply. So, in order to save the environment, they will make you happy by shutting down your business, locking you up, disbanding private property, forcing you to become dependent on the state. And this again with no consultation. Are you okay with these measures being taken against you, held down and prevented from working until they can make the Great Reset a reality? Are you okay with that? They believe your concession is irrelevant. You will live on a sort of high-tech welfare state, and it's okay because it will be for your own good and for the good of the planet. 11. What about those who don't want to live on welfare? And they are legion. What about the dreamers, the authors, the singers, the inventors, the innovators, those who want to take a shot at building something amazing? If the entire system is socially engineered against aspiration, and if you are not supposed to have, and certainly not supposed to have, more than someone else, what do we have left to dream about? Now, certainly from my perspective, my value system says that charity is incredibly important, but a global social welfare state, that's not the same thing. And it just may cause the dreamers to stop dreaming. At what cost do we embark on this project? Certainly, it is verifiably true that those living on constant social welfare have higher rates of just about every social malady, including family breakup, divorce, teenage pregnancy, truancy, alcoholism, drug usage, theft, interpersonal violence. So what happens if we ramp this up to a global scale? What could possibly go wrong? Will there be very much goodness left by the next generation? Or will we psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually rot? Could that be the consequence? Do we become like the useless Eloi of the classic tale, The Time Machine, every bit as unable to fend for ourselves as them, but perhaps slightly more morally depraved? Maybe there is something moralizing and discipline creating about building your own life through aspirational work. What if that is necessary to the soul? Perhaps that actually generates hope. But to enjoy such hope, such discipline, such meaning, a life of your own creation. First, you require freedom. And that is the problem they have every intention of solving. Now, this whole thing becomes a test of your capacity to resist groupthink, because the message is so smoothly delivered by such educated, well-spoken, well-dressed, confident-looking leaders who will tell you with much eye contact how wonderful, how good this will be for you, and how it is all for the greater good. You may even get a royal or two plugging the idea. And who has more brand equity among the public? Are you able to resist the suit effect? To remain mentally independent and to stand by the idea? No matter how modern or high-tech it sounds, this is a terrible philosophy. History shows that most new generations are simply not able to do this. When they are told this is the way of the future and this is for the greater common good, they simply go along with it. Let's see. The test is running live right now. If you enjoyed this sort of content, please subscribe, please feel free to share these videos, and please do hit the notifications bell so that you will be alerted every time a new video becomes available. I'm Douglas Kruger, author of the global new book, Political Correctness Does More Harm Than Good.